Hey guys, today I'm going to go ahead and teach you guys about President George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. So our 41st and 42nd President of the United States. Let me go ahead and share my PowerPoint screen with you guys. Here we go. All right. Okie dokie. By the way, you guys, we are coming to an end with the school year. I'm excited, you're excited. I'm not very excited, but I really don't like this distance learning. I'd rather be in the classroom teaching this to you guys versus like through video. It hasn't been fun for me, but it's very convenient for you guys. You know, you get to be at home, at the comfort of your home, doing online learning. It's been pretty easy for you guys, I'm sure. But anyways, just want to let you guys know that we have this video lesson and then the next video lesson, which is next week's, and then we are going to take it easy after this. Thank God. So I'm going to go from 2 assignments to just 1 assignment, and then give you guys the option to watch a history movie and then write like a summary over it, or you can do a reading. So that's what's coming, not next week, but the week after. So we're gonna try to finish off the school year, the month of May, with just easy, lesson choices, basically. So let me go ahead and start this video lesson with you guys. All right, President George H.W. Bush. All right, 41st President of the United States. So George Bush, some of you guys are familiar with his son, who became the 43rd president. But so some of you guys aren't familiar with George Sr., that's what they call him. He actually passed away a few years ago, not too long ago. It was very sad, but he was a good president. So George H.W. Bush ends up being elected because he was actually vice president to Ronald Reagan. And people had loved Ronald Reagan. They loved everything about him. And they figured that if they went ahead and elected Ronald Reagan as vice president, then things would be the same types of policies. He learned from the best, basically. So, the American people, the public, they just felt comfortable with, Republican president in office who learned under Reagan. So that is how he basically won. He was also very compassionate as well. One thing that he platformed about was trying to help the homelessness problem in the United States, poverty, trying to tackle that. And then also improve education as well, and fight drug use. Drug dealings, that was really big. I mean, it still is big, but it was even bigger in the early 1990s. All right, domestic policy within the US. All right, so we had a little mini recession by 1990, which that was the, first year for President Bush. I believe the election was in 1989, and 1990 was like his first year. So there were some economic problems going on, nothing too major. It wasn't like the 70s, because the 70s was really bad under Carter. But the 80s, it got a little bit better, but then it started to all of a sudden the economy started to tank a little bit. So there's reduced spending by consumers, meaning consumers, us, customers, the ones who consume, who buy. We're not really buying as much, and we're not buying as much because we're losing jobs, and we're losing jobs mainly in the Midwest, which I will show you guys a map right now. And if people are losing jobs, they don't have money, they can't spend as much, and that hurts the entire economy. The economy is based off of people buying and selling. And then reduced spending by the government. We did experience that in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan, Republicans in general, are really big about not really spending so much towards programs, towards just different things. They will spend on military, but they won't spend as much on other things compared to Democratic presidents. All right, so we talked about the Sun Belt migration, how people were moving to the southern part of the United States, and it was all because of the new advancements, right, in like such as air conditioning. But people are moving to the south. Where are they moving from? They're moving from this area right here, the Midwest, and also the Northeast. And they're moving because that is where the jobs are being lost. So this area right here is called the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt, referring to, like, if some of you guys are familiar with Pittsburgh, like such as the Pittsburgh Steelers, like Steel City, all of this is where the factories were. I mean, they still are, but it's not as big as it used to be back in the day. The factories were just really an industrial center of the United States, basically. Tons of jobs, but factories are closing down, businesses are closing down. It was just deteriorating. They just needed to renovate, upgrade these businesses, and many of these factories just chose to just close down permanently. And instead, I think I talked about this, they opened up in China. So in China and in other countries where, you know, the labor is cheaper, it's just cheaper to hire people to work in these factories. You don't have to worry about paying them benefits, giving them, you know, breaks and days off and just different things like that. So these factories are just causing a loss of jobs. So that is the Rust Belt area. And like I said, these people migrated to the south where it was just cheaper to live and it's just more possible to live. So compared to before the technological advancements in that region. Anyways, coal and iron was, you know, these were two resources that were pretty big over here in this area. So let's see, there you go, Rust Belt, Sun Belt. All right, foreign policy. So we talked about the Cold War coming to an end, and the Cold War, the first sign that the Cold War was coming to an end is in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell in Germany, reuniting, you know, the capital Berlin, East and West Berlin, and then all of Germany was reunited, East and West Germany, becoming one German country. Well, that was 1989. So a couple of years later, by 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved its empire, held its first democratic election, meaning if they're holding an election, then that's the complete opposite of communism. That is just, that's democracy, basically, when you hold an election. So that was it. Communism fell, and we knew that communism wasn't a threat. The Soviet Union wasn't a threat to us anymore. So that officially marks, 1991 officially marks the end of the Cold War. Okay. All right, so we have some issues at this time in the early 1990s. Many people were very familiar. There were tons of wars going on right here. Horrible civil wars, just a lot of revamping of the maps, countries joining, and then like borders just moving, and like people are now part of another country that they don't want to be, and there was just crazy civil wars and genocide. Oh my goodness, I am getting ahead of myself. I'm starting to talk about a different topic. I'm starting to talk about the Baltic Wars. Excuse me on that. All right. We'll cross that out for right now. We'll come back to that. Persian Gulf War. Here we go. Persian Gulf War. Okay, different war. In 1990, there was the Persian Gulf War, and this was actually our very first war with Iraq. So we've had two wars with Iraq. This one and then the one that was in 2003, which you guys are probably more familiar with that one than you are with this one. So what happened was Saddam Hussein, who was the dictator of Iraq, and we've all heard of Saddam Hussein. He's been dictator for a while. He was dictator he was dictator in 1990, and he decides that he wants to invade this small little country nearby Iraq called Kuwait. Here is Kuwait right here. So here's Iraq. So Iraq invaded Kuwait, and they had felt that Kuwait was actually part of Iraq. You know, before Kuwait actually used to be part of Iraq, but then Kuwait was made a new country, and Iraq was just not accepting that Kuwait was no longer part of them. So Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and so after he invaded Kuwait, he also was planning to invade Saudi Arabia, which here is Saudi Arabia right next to Iraq, huge country. And so that was the talk. That was what our intel, you know, heard about Iraq, about Saddam Hussein. And we were just watching this from TV, like Kuwait being invaded, hearing about the plans for Saudi Arabia to be taken over by Iraq. And if it were to have been successful, if Iraq were to have taken over both Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, then officially Iraq would own half of the world's oil supply, half of the world's between these three countries. Now, Iraq already has tons of oil. Iraq is like probably the #1 or #2 leading producer of oil today. But it would just basically entitle them to more oil control if they took over these two countries. So should we intervene? That's the debate. We've been talking about that and how it is, that's how it is till this day. We are always involved with other countries, especially in the Middle East, trying to keep the peace and different things like that. That is where OPEC is. OPEC are all these countries right here that own the majority of the world's oil and sell it to many countries. So if there is instability in this region, like civil wars, things like that, it affects our trade with them. I mean, it's hard to trade with a country that is at war. So that's kind of the reason why we try to keep the peace and try to keep it stable in that region, so that way our economies don't tank because of the issues that go on. So should we help Kuwait, poor little Kuwait being taken over by Iraq, and then maybe, you know, protect Saudi Arabia? Well, we did. And so our troops went ahead and landed in Saudi Arabia, and they were there just in case Iraq decided to go along with its plans to invade Saudi Arabia. And then when we were there, we went ahead and we gave an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein, and we told him, you need to remove your soldiers from Kuwait, or you are going to deal with us. It will be a full-on war with the United States, and you need to do this by January 15th. And Saddam Hussein refused. January 15th came, nothing, we heard nothing. They didn't remove their soldiers, and basically we were like, all right, it's on. And that is how Operation Desert Storm happened. So Operation Desert Storm was the plan, the military plan to liberate free Kuwait from Iraqi control. Remember, it was completely taken over by Iraq. We were just in Saudi Arabia preparing for this and hoping that Saddam Hussein would remove its soldiers, but they didn't. So from there, when January 15th came, after that, we went ahead and we launched all these airstrikes on Iraq. And I'm going to show you a map right now. Well, just going back to the same map. All the stars are all the airstrikes that we launched on Iraq, hitting military bases, centers, and things like that, just industrial centers, just trying to hurt them. And then this is where we were at. This is where we were stationed. So after January 15th, we went ahead and we came in and we invaded Kuwait to fight off the Iraqis that were present. And then of course you had the airstrikes as well. So we had like an air war, and then also a ground assault. So air and ground assault. And it didn't take long. It took a few weeks, just about a little over a month. And then we were able to push the Iraqis out, or they just started to retreat out of Kuwait and just go back to Iraq. And then we were like, you know what? Saddam Hussein's our enemy. He is always going to be a problem as long as he is in power. So we actually invaded Iraq as well, like ground assault, like where we had our soldiers move into Iraq. And we were planning to like seriously overthrow, take over Saddam Hussein, capture him. And when our troops started to move into Iraq, Saddam Hussein was like, no, 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 ceasefire. Like, I don't want any war with you guys. And that was it. So a little over a month and the war was won. But here are some famous generals. Colin Powell became a very high-ranked, not just military leader, but he had a really high-ranked position within the U.S. government after this. Iraq, and not too happy with the fact that the United States got involved with their war with Kuwait. On their way out of the country, Iraqi troops went ahead and just bombed and set fire to tons of land, like hundreds and thousands of acres that were in Kuwait that had oil. Just caught it all on fire. And I don't know if you know this, but like it is impossible, almost impossible to put fires out that start in oil reservoirs and things like that. So actually like thousands of people died in Kuwait from these fires. They lost their homes. Tons of animals were caught on fire. It was just horrible. Everything was burned as the Iraqis like retreated from Kuwait back home. All right, the election of 1992. This is pretty important because we do have a PowerPoint question. We only have 5 questions that we have to answer dealing with this PowerPoint, and this is one of the questions. So 1992 was an election year, and we have George H.W. Bush, who's running for re-election, and then we have a new person, Bill Clinton, the famous Bill Clinton, who's also running in this 1992 election. And then we have an independent, a third party, Ross Perot. Okay, so we don't always get independents, you know, like a person who doesn't want to run as a Democratic or a Republican. Because, you know, if you run as a Republican or a Democrat, it's just really hard to get that final, you know, that final card and be one of the finalists out of, you know, after just kind of like knocking everybody out. So sometimes people run as an independent and they are actually allowed to participate in this election if they make it all the way to the top as one of the finalists. Anyways, you get it. Between these 3 right here, it was really, really tough. So Bill Clinton was actually a governor in Arkansas, and he was a Democratic. And then his vice president was Al Gore. And then you have George H.W. Bush, Republican from Texas. The Bushes are from Texas. And then you have Ross Perot, like I said, an independent, but he's also from Texas, just like George H.W. Bush. And his principles are actually very similar to George Bush's. In other words, he is very supportive of like Republican ideas and stuff like that. So he's considered an independent, but he is more Republican than anything else. So Texans are very familiar with both of these guys right here. And this actually affected the election in a very negative way for George H.W. Bush. Ross Perot, let's look at this right here, the popular vote, meaning like everyone's votes. Ross Perot actually, because he ran in this election as an independent, he ends up taking 19 million, almost 20 million votes, which could have gone to George H.W. Bush. And a lot of these were Texans votes. So if you were to have eliminated Ross Perot from the picture, then those close to 20 million votes would have possibly gone to George H.W. Bush, and he would have won the election against Bill Clinton. But because the votes were split between these two, it allowed Bill Clinton to narrowly win, and that's how it happened. So Bill Clinton becomes the 42nd president of the United States. Crazy. Okay, and that's what we just talked about right now, having a third party, an independent candidate, affect an election. So we have Bill Clinton in office as president of the United States. Hillary Clinton was actually Secretary of State, and we're familiar with Hillary Clinton, especially in the last few years. She did run for president against Trump in the 2016 election, but she was already in office. She was already working for the national government for a very long time. Secretary of State is a very, very high position. It is up there with vice presidents and presidents. So anyways, she was very influential. I'm sure before all the scandals broke out, she was a good Secretary of State. She had good leadership qualities. She had to have been Secretary of State, but things just went south for her, unfortunately. So the Clintons are in office at this time together. You have president, and then you have Secretary of State. Domestic policy under Bill Clinton. I am going to skip the contract with America because it's not really relevant to the PowerPoint questions, and I'm not sure if it's on the TIECS anymore, but I don't really want you to hear something you don't have to. This is juicy. The impeachment of Bill Clinton because of his scandals. So Bill Clinton was the second president to actually be impeached, and he became impeached because, well, he had a sexual affair with a White House intern, a young girl. She was in her 20s, right here. This is Monica Lewinsky. And he had an affair, and of course, the media is the one that found out about it first, exposed it. It became a huge scandal. And this is before when Americans were very traditional, very conservative. Things like that can ruin a president's reputation. Not so much anymore, but it used to back in the day. And there was an investigation that was ordered on this. And then some other things came out too, like supposedly, Bill Clinton did some illegal drugs. And anyways, the Senate went ahead and investigated this. That's what, the legislative branch, that's what they do. They look into this. And when they questioned him, he lied about the affair under oath. He lied about the other things that were coming to light. I mean, when you raise your right hand and you take an oath that you swear to tell the truth, you got to tell the truth, because if it comes back that you lied, then it's very harsh punishments for you. So he lied about his affair. He denied the affair with Monica Lewinsky under oath. And then there was all this proof that came out, and I can't get into it because it's actually very explicit and rated R, but it all came out to light, and they're like, wow, Clinton lied under oath. So because he lied, they decided to impeach him, which means they go ahead and vote to find out if he's guilty, and he was impeached. But then when the Senate decided to vote to remove him, which is part of the impeachment, once you're impeached, the Senate will vote. Once you're impeached by the House of Representatives, then the Senate votes to decide if they should remove this person from office. They did not remove him. The votes fell short, and he was able to stay in office. But this was actually at the end of his second term. So I think that's why they decided not to remove him, because he was already going to finish up the second term and be out of office anyway. So just might as well finish out the year, and that's it. It was also like an election time again. So there is that. Bill Clinton. That's Monica Lewinsky later. Okay, Bill Clinton, foreign policy. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, how there were wars in the Balkan area, in the Balkans. Lots of little civil wars, revamping of the map in Europe. There was crazy, crazy genocide going on. And we've known about genocide, you know, whenever we hear about genocide, we think of the Holocaust, when Hitler was trying to um, kill all the Jews and other types of people as well who he felt were undesirables. Well, genocide was going on in the early 1990s here in this southeastern region of Europe. It was horrible. Everyone knew about this. It was all over the news. The UN got involved. Bill Clinton got involved. The US, you know, is considered one of the head council members of the United Nations. And Clinton actually helped negotiate peace in this region between the countries. And he got a lot of praise for that, for being able to, you know, just come to terms or help these countries come to terms and stop this war, stop this fighting in the Balkan region. But it was really bad. Like, it was really, really bad. Okay, so we're almost at the end of this PowerPoint. NAFTA, some of you guys have heard of NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. So NAFTA was signed in the early 1990s, and it stands for a free trade agreement between North American countries. So North American countries meaning the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Those three are considered North American countries. So because of NAFTA, these countries can buy and sell to each other without having to worry about tariffs, about taxes. And this is why the United States gets a lot of people from Mexico who come to the United States, especially to Texas, come to Texas. They do a lot of shopping. We see them at the malls. They buy tons of stuff. And then they actually don't have to pay taxes. Now, they do pay taxes up front when they're purchasing stuff, but then they get all their taxes reimbursed if they save their receipts. It's part of NAFTA. And the same thing for the United States. Many Americans go to Mexico and they buy a lot of stuff in Mexico. They shop and they don't have to worry about paying the taxes off of all the things that they buy in Mexico. So I used to live very, very close to the Mexican-Texas border. And I mean, I'm talking about, like, I lived like 5 minutes away. I used to just walk over, yes, myself, me and friends or family, we used to walk over across the border of Mexico. And we used to go buy things there, just different types of things that were really, really cheap, cheaper than in the United States. One thing was avocados. Avocados are really, like, good in Mexico. Anyways, we used to buy all that stuff, and then we don't have to pay taxes. It was pretty convenient. And then same thing, a lot of Americans actually travel to Canada to buy medicines, to buy prescription medicines, because it's cheaper in Canada. And then you don't have to pay the taxes. So that's the agreement that we have between these three countries. So it's actually pretty cool. And trade really has increased severely, like so much since then, since it was first created. GATT stands for General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. So GATT is actually the old name of the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization was established in 1994, took over after GATT, and it's pretty neat. It's just a huge trade organization of countries. So kind of like United Nations, like, you know, like countries who come together. Well, in this case, it's all about trade. It's all about business. It's not about war. It's not a military alliance. It's all economic. So you might have countries. I'm going to give you some examples. So like OPEC is part of this, the Middle Eastern countries that hold most of the world's oil. And then like South America, you know, you have Colombia, and then you have like Venezuela, and then you have Central American countries, Nicaragua. They're all producers of something. Bananas, different types of fruits like your apples and limes and lemons and, you know, tobacco and this and that. They're all known for, you know, producing that stuff. So they're part of the WTO, in which many countries can agree to buy bananas from Nicaragua, can buy their apples from Venezuela, can buy tobacco from Colombia, you know what I mean? So it's pretty neat that countries can all agree, can choose from this big old piggy bank of choices for trade items, and tariffs are low, and it just benefits all countries, the buyers and sellers. So it's pretty neat. The World Trade Organization, it has definitely increased globalization, has helped many countries who are developing countries generate more business, being part of the World Trade Organization. And I believe that is it. I am done. I spoke so much. I am so sorry. I really missed the classroom. But anyways, if you guys have any questions, feel free to contact me. You know, I'm available all the times. I always try to get back to you guys. If I don't get back to your email, I may have missed it because I get a million emails. Whenever you guys submit something to Google Classroom, I get it as an email. So I get like a million emails, and sometimes it's easy to overlook an email that's like a personal message, like a private message that you're trying to ask me something. So, but I'm available, and have a great week, and be safe out there, you guys. Bye.